I thought I was finally building a genuine friendship in my college, but somewhere between late-night texts, shared classes, and promises of inclusion, I was slowly pushed aside, kept in the dark, and left questioning my worth. I'm a 19-year-old first-year college student, and about 2 months ago, I made a new friend who I genuinely believed was going to become one of the most important people in my life, at least during this chapter. She's 19 as well, in many of the same classes as me, and from the beginning she came across as kind, thoughtful, emotionally intelligent, and trustworthy. The kind of person who listens when you talk, who asks follow-up questions, who actually seems interested instead of just being polite. At first, most of our interactions were through text. We would talk every single day, often for hours at a time. Not just surface-level stuff either. We talked about our interests, our classes, random dumb jokes, but also about heavier things like mental health, family struggles, insecurities, and what we want out of life. Those conversations felt real. They felt meaningful. I didn't feel like I was talking into a void. For context, she has a boyfriend, and I never viewed her romantically. I want to make that very clear. I didn't have feelings for her, and I wasn't hoping for anything more than friendship. What I was craving was connection. I've been alone for most of my life. I've always felt invisible, like I exist on the sidelines while everyone else forms bonds effortlessly. Coming into college, I promised myself I would try to change that. I wanted to make friends. I wanted to feel like I belonged somewhere. And for a while, it felt like I finally did. She made me feel seen in a way I'm not used to. She once told me I was one of the few good men in her life, and that stuck with me more than I expected. Not because it was flattering, but because it made me feel valued. Like I wasn't just background noise. Like maybe I deserve human connection too. I did meet other people as well. I made a few friends that I hang out with regularly, people I like and enjoy being around. But my friendship with her felt different. We shared the same interests, the same sense of humor, the same way of looking at things. Talking to her felt easy. I didn't feel like I had to filter myself or perform. I could just be me, and that was enough. Then, about 2 weeks ago, something started to change. At first it was subtle. I'd ask if she wanted to hang out, and she'd say she couldn't. Homework, group projects, stress, being tired. All reasonable excuses. I didn't question it at first. I knew she was dealing with some frustration related to group work, and college can get overwhelming quickly. Plus, we were still texting like normal, sometimes for hours. So I assumed she was just busy in person but still comfortable talking. But it kept happening. Every time I suggested hanging out, there was a reason it couldn't happen. And slowly, I realized I was always the one initiating. I was always the one asking. Still, I told myself not to overthink it. I didn't want to be clingy or paranoid. I didn't want to project my insecurities onto her. I kept giving her the benefit of the doubt, even though a quiet part of me was starting to feel uneasy. Then, about a week ago, something happened that made everything feel different. There's been a lot of discussion in one of our classes about potential research opportunities with the professor. She had already been in contact with him about it, and eventually he created a group chat for students who were interested. She added me to that group since I was also interested, and that made me feel included. Like, she wanted me there. Things seemed normal after that until one day when we were on campus together hanging out and talking. In the middle of a conversation, she casually mentioned that she was going to the professor's office later that day because he had asked her to come by. She also mentioned that she and 2 of her friends were going to a lab with him to discuss the research further. I remember feeling immediately confused. Not angry, not jealous, just confused. I told her she hadn't mentioned any of this to me. She looked surprised, almost genuinely confused herself, and reassured me that I didn't need to worry, that I'd be included, that it wasn't a big deal. I tried to accept that. I didn't want to push or make things awkward. I trusted her. The rest of the day continued like normal. Later, we had a lecture together. She and her friends left early, while I stayed until the end. When I got out, I texted her, and she said she was heading to the professor's office. So I started walking there too. The office was across campus, and I was walking with another friend who's a slower walker, so it took us a bit longer to get there. As we walked, this strange, sinking feeling started forming in my chest. I didn't fully understand it yet, but something felt off. Like I was already late to something I was supposed to be part of. Like I was approaching a realization I wasn't ready for. And that was the moment I started to feel like maybe I wasn't as included as I thought. Like maybe the closeness I felt was more one-sided than I wanted to believe. When we finally got to the professor's office, it was completely empty. No professor, no students, no sign that anyone had been there recently. I stood there for a moment feeling awkward and unsure of myself, then texted her to let her know that nobody was there. I assumed maybe they had already gone to the lab, and she just couldn't reply at the moment. I didn't want to come across as impatient or clingy, so after waiting a bit, I sent another message asking what the professor had said and added that she could take her time replying because I didn't want to rush her or interrupt anything important. Almost immediately after sending those messages, I started to overthink them. I remembered how tired she'd been looking lately, how overwhelmed she seemed with classes and group projects, and I worried that I might be bothering her unnecessarily. I didn't want to be another source of pressure. I didn't want to be too much. So I deleted those messages and sent a much simpler one instead, just asking if she was okay. She replied later saying she was fine. We didn't talk for the rest of that day, and I told myself that was normal. People don't have to talk every day. People need space. I tried to ignore the uneasy feeling in my chest and convince myself that nothing was wrong. The next day, I made an effort to act completely normal. I didn't want to be distant or cold, and I didn't want to make things awkward. I asked if she wanted to hang out, and she said she couldn't. I told her that was okay, and went to hang out with another friend instead. Later, on my way to our lecture, I saw her with her usual group of 3 friends, laughing and talking like everything was perfectly fine. I noticed it, but I didn't let myself dwell on it. She's allowed to have other friends. That alone shouldn't mean anything. During the lecture, I casually asked her what the professor had said the day before. She replied, "He said he'll email us." That was it. Short, vague, and strangely dismissive. The moment she said it, something in my gut dropped. I knew that answer didn't line up with what I'd already heard. A friend of mine had seen her and her friends in the lab the day before, and told me they were in there talking with the professor for about 30 minutes. I didn't confront her. I didn't press for details. I didn't accuse her of lying. I just said, okay, and waited for the lecture to end, trying to keep my emotions in check. As soon as class was over, I went straight up to the professor myself and asked him about the research opportunity. He was friendly and open, and he explained that he had told her they would be meeting with postgraduate students later that week to discuss research opportunities and next steps. She never told me that. I thanked him and stepped away to sign the attendance sheet. While I was doing that, I noticed her standing close to the professor, leaning in and whispering something to him. I couldn't hear what she said, but I clearly heard him respond with something like, "Just tell me whatever you want and I'll do it." That moment hit me harder than I expected. It felt like confirmation of something I'd been trying not to admit to myself. I grabbed my things and left without saying a word to her. I didn't trust myself to stay calm if I spoke to her right then. Later that same day, I emailed another professor about a different research opportunity and found out his office hours. I decided to go by his office, but when I got there, he wasn't in. As I walked back to meet the friend I'd been hanging out with earlier, I saw her again. She was sitting with 2 of her friends and my friend. I said hello and sat down briefly. She looked genuinely exhausted. She was laying her head on one of her friend's legs and looked like she was either in pain or completely drained. Seeing her like that immediately softened everything I was feeling. All the frustration and hurt I'd been carrying suddenly felt selfish. I didn't bring anything up. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to add to whatever she was dealing with. Not long after, they all got up and left, and since it was already the end of the day, I left too. When I got home, I texted her about the office hours I'd learned about, since she'd also been interested in that research. I told her I planned on going the next day. I still didn't mention the lab. I didn't mention what the professor told me. I didn't mention the whispering or the inconsistencies. I just asked if she was okay and shared the information. She replied with a simple thank you. A couple of hours later, she sent another message. She said, "Since you asked about research with Professor 1, I did talk to Professor 1, and unfortunately, I'm not allowed to let anyone in on it without the professor's permission." That message directly contradicted what I had heard him say to her. I replied politely, saying that I understood and thanking her for letting me know. But inside, I felt hollow. At that point, it stopped being about the research entirely. It was about the pattern that had formed, without me wanting to see it. She had reassured me multiple times that I'd be included. She had acted confused when I said I didn't know about meetings. She had downplayed everything. And yet, information kept being withheld from me while I was repeatedly told not to worry. I started replaying everything in my head. Every long conversation. Every moment where she made me feel valued. Every reassurance that made me feel safe in the friendship. I started questioning whether I had misread the entire situation from the beginning. Whether I had imagined a closeness that wasn't actually there. or whether she had enjoyed the emotional support and attention I gave her without ever intending to include me in the parts of her life that mattered. What hurt the most was how careful I had been. I never pushed boundaries. I never demanded anything from her. I always tried to be patient, understanding, and respectful. And somehow, despite all of that, I still ended up feeling excluded and quietly pushed aside. After that, I was honestly pretty pissed. Not explosive, not confrontational, just that quiet, heavy kind of anger that sits in your chest and makes everything feel tight. I kept replaying everything in my head over and over. Why was she suddenly avoiding me? Why was she gatekeeping something she knew I cared about and genuinely needed? What did I do wrong? I couldn't find a single clear answer, and the not knowing was eating at me more than anything else. The more I thought about it, the more it felt intentional. Not malicious, necessarily, but deliberate. Information was being withheld. Plans were being made, without me. Promises to include me turned into vague half-truths and contradictions. And instead of just being upfront with me, she chose to dodge, minimize, and redirect. So I made a decision. If she was going to avoid me, I would do the same. Not as revenge, but as self-preservation. I didn't want to keep putting myself in a position where I felt stupid for trusting someone who clearly wasn't being honest with me. The next day, she tried to act like everything was normal. She greeted me casually, made small talk, the same way she always did. But I just shut it down. I wasn't rude, at least not intentionally. I didn't snap at her or say anything mean. I just kept my responses short, neutral. I didn't linger. I didn't initiate conversation. I didn't sit near her if I didn't have to. I could feel myself pulling away in real time, and honestly, part of me felt guilty about it. I worried I was being immature or passive-aggressive. I worried that I was misreading the situation and punishing her for something that maybe wasn't as personal as it felt. That day ended like that. Quietly. Awkwardly. And after that, we didn't talk at all for the rest of the week. No texts. No late-night conversations. No checking in. In person, our interactions were minimal and surface level, almost like we were strangers who just happened to share the same space. Every time I saw her laughing with her other friends, it stung more than I expected it to. I keep asking myself if I'm doing the right thing. On one hand, it feels justified. Why should I keep showing up emotionally for someone who won't even give me basic honesty? Why should I keep chasing clarity when she's the one creating confusion? But on the other hand, I'm terrified that I'm overthinking everything and sabotaging what could have been a genuinely good friendship. What really bothers me is the gatekeeping. That's the part one can't let go of. This wasn't just some casual hangout or irrelevant detail. This was research. Something she knew I was interested in, something that could actually matter for my future. It's not like I'm a horrible student either. I got an A+ on that class's midterm. I participate. I show up. I care. Sure, my grades in other classes haven't been great, and I can admit that. If that was the reason she didn't want to include me, I could have accepted that. It would have hurt, but at least it would have been honest. What I can't accept is being lied to, reassured, and then quietly excluded anyway. What makes it feel even worse is the irony. She always said one of the things she hated most was lying and dishonesty. She talked a lot about how important transparency was to her, how she valued people being upfront instead of sneaky or passive. And now here I am, feeling like I was misled at every turn. It makes me question whether those values were real or just things she liked to say about herself. Now I'm stuck in this awful in-between space. I don't know if avoiding her is protecting my mental health or if it's me slowly destroying a friendship because of my own insecurities. I don't know if I'm reading too much into small things and making them about me when they aren't. But at the same time, my gut keeps telling me that something wasn't right, and I don't want to ignore that feeling just to keep the peace.